Lorena is a woman who takes home $3,100 a month, and the money she has saved is more than her brother's, who earns 3 times what she does. He cannot explain it. He does not gamble, and he swears he watches every dollar. The only thing Lorena has that he does not is a small notebook she fills in by hand each evening, built on a method a Japanese journalist invented in 1904. By the end of this video, you will be running that exact system yourself, and it will cost you nothing but a pen. That gap between Lorena and her brother is the entire reason this video exists, because it quietly proves something the personal finance world keeps getting backwards. We are trained to treat wealth as an income problem. Earn more, the thinking goes, and the saving takes care of itself. But the numbers from this year tell a very different story. As of this spring, the personal saving rate in America fell to roughly 2.6% of what households actually bring home. 59% of Americans say they could not cover a $1,000 emergency from savings without reaching for a credit card. A separate survey early this year found the median emergency fund had been cut in half from the year before, down to about $5,000, while the amount people said they wanted was double that. And this next part should stop you cold. Survey after survey keeps finding that a striking share of households earning well into the 6 figures are living paycheck to paycheck, sitting right beside families who earn a small fraction of that. So if more money were the answer, those high earners would all be fine. Clearly, plenty of them are not, which means the lever that actually moves your finances is not the size of your paycheck. It is what happens in the narrow space between the moment money lands in your account and the moment it slips back out. That quiet little gap is exactly what the Kakeibo method was built to control, and it does it without an app, without a spreadsheet, and without asking you to earn another cent. Let me take you back to where this started, because the origin tells you everything about why it works. It is 1904 in Tokyo, and a writer named Hani Motoko was building something nobody had built for ordinary households before. Motoko is remembered today as Japan's first female journalist. At a time when most women could not own property and had almost no financial standing of their own, she published a simple household system inside a women's magazine and gave it a name that translates to household financial ledger. In Japanese, that word is Kakeibo, pronounced Kakeibo. The idea behind it was almost defiant for its era. Motoko believed that if a woman running a home could see every coin flowing in and out written in her own hand, she would gain real power over a life that society otherwise controlled for her. There were no calculators in her world, no banking apps, no automatic payments. There was a notebook, a pen, and the quiet discipline to be honest on paper. What she could not have predicted is that her little ledger would outlast nearly every financial fad of the following century. More than 120 years later, that same system is still in daily use across Japan, a country that remains one of the most savings-minded cultures on earth, where cash still carries an almost ceremonial weight, and children are taught young to hold on to money rather than spend it the moment it arrives. So why did the rest of the world only catch on recently? Because in 2017, a writer named Fumiko Chiba published a guide to the method in English, and a 100-year-old Japanese tradition suddenly landed in the middle of a Western culture drowning in subscriptions, tap to pay, and buy now pay later. The timing could not have been sharper. People were spending faster and feeling it less than at any point in history. And here was a system whose entire premise was to slow down and feel every dollar again. Now, before you roll your eyes at the idea of writing things down by hand in 2026, stay with me, because the reason it works is the reason it has lasted. This is the detail almost everyone misses when they first hear about Kakeibo. It works nothing like a normal budgeting system. Its real job is awareness, and that one distinction changes everything about how it performs. A budgeting app is built for speed. It links to your accounts, sorts your transactions automatically, and hands you a tidy chart at the end of the month. That sounds helpful, and in one narrow way it is. But speed is the exact thing that lets money disappear without you ever feeling it leave. Think about how a tap-to-pay purchase actually feels in your body. You touch your phone to a reader, a screen blinks, and you walk away. Your brain barely registers that anything left your life. Researchers who study spending have a name for this. They call it the pain of paying, and decades of work has shown that the more frictionless a payment feels, the more we spend and the less we remember doing it. Cash hurts a little to hand over, a card hurts less, a tap hurts not at all. Kakeibo deliberately reverses that slide. At the end of the day, you sit down, open your notebook, and write each number with your own hand. That single act takes about 60 to 90 seconds, and in that minute something shifts. You stop being a passive spender reviewing charts after the fact and become someone confronting each choice while it is still fresh enough to sting a little. Studies of handwriting have found that the slow manual act engages parts of the brain that tapping a screen never touches. The friction everyone tries to remove from money is the very thing Kakeibo puts back on purpose, because that friction is the medicine. Take Margot, a teacher who tried 3 different budgeting apps over 2 years and quit all of them. The apps were accurate. They told her precisely where her money went and she ignored every notification, because a chart never made her feel anything. 2 weeks into writing her purchases by hand, she stopped buying lunch out, not because a rule told her to, but because writing $14 for a sandwich 5 evenings in a row finally made the number real. Nothing about her income changed. The only thing that changed was that she was awake while it happened. So how does the system actually run? It rests on 4 questions in 4 categories, and once you understand both, you can start this week. Let me walk you through the 4 questions first, because they frame everything else you will do. The first question is the simplest, and it is the one people answer wrong most often. How much money do you actually have? Not your salary, not the number on your offer letter. The real figure is what lands in your account after taxes, minus the fixed costs you genuinely cannot avoid this month. Things like rent or a mortgage, insurance, and any loan payment that is locked in. Whatever survives that subtraction is the only money the method cares about, because it is the only money you truly control. For a lot of people, writing that single number down is the first honest financial moment they have had in years, and it is often smaller and more sobering than they expected. Good. That discomfort is the system already working. The second question is where Kakeibo separates itself from almost every Western approach. How much would you like to save? Notice the order. You decide your savings goal before you plan a single dollar of spending, and then you physically move that money out of reach first. Western budgets usually run the opposite way. They tell you to cover your needs, enjoy your wants, and save whatever happens to be left at the end of the month. Anyone who has tried that knows what is left at the end, which is usually nothing, because spending expands to fill whatever space you give it. Kakeibo flips the sequence so that your future gets paid before your impulses ever get a turn. The third question sounds obvious until you try to answer it honestly. How much are you actually spending? Not how much you assume you spend. The figure you carry in your head and the figure written in the notebook are almost never the same, and the distance between those 2 numbers is precisely where your money has been quietly leaking for years. That distance is the whole problem, and the notebook exists to close it. The fourth question is the heart of the entire method. How can you improve? And the genius is in the framing. It does not ask what you did wrong, and it does not invite guilt or shame, which happen to be the 2 emotions that kill every budget eventually. All it asks is what one change you could make next month. Sometimes the answer is to spend less on a habit you never noticed. Sometimes the answer is to spend more on something you genuinely love and had been starving. Improvement here points you forward. It never scolds you, and that is exactly why people stick with it when every guilt-based system has already made them quit. Those 4 questions give the method its rhythm. The 4 categories give it its structure, and this is where Kakeibo gets genuinely clever. A typical budgeting app splits your life into 15 or 20 separate line items, and tracking that many buckets by hand would collapse inside of a week. Kakeibo uses only 4, and the real trick is that it sorts your spending not by what you bought, but by why you bought it. That single shift in framing does more work than any chart ever could. The first category is needs, sometimes called survival. These are the non-negotiables that keep your life running. Groceries, utilities, transportation to work, basic clothing, the prescription you cannot skip. If your life would genuinely break without it, it belongs here. The catch is that this category is where the most dangerous self-deception lives, because almost everything can be dressed up to look like a need if you squint hard enough. The second category is wants, sometimes called optional. These are the purchases you chose, not the ones forced on you. The takeout you ordered because cooking felt like too much that night, the third coffee of the day, the shirt you bought mostly because it was on sale. None of these are crimes, and the method is not here to make you feel like a sinner for enjoying your life. The point is simply to see them clearly, because a want quietly wearing the costume of a need is the single most common leak in any household budget, rich or poor. The third category is the one that makes Kakeibo feel distinctly Japanese, and it is my favorite of the four. It is called culture. This covers books, museum tickets, a class you are taking, a concert, an instrument, anything that feeds your mind or sharpens your craft. In a typical Western budget, this spending gets dumped into wants and cut first the moment money gets tight. Kakeibo refuses to do that. It treats cultural enrichment as something worth protecting on its own line, because a life stripped down to nothing but bills and savings is not a life anyone actually wants to live. And a system that makes you miserable is a system you will abandon. The method has no interest in turning you into a monk who never enjoys anything. Its only request is that you spend on purpose instead of on autopilot. The fourth category is unexpected. Car repairs, a surprise medical bill, the wedding gift for the cousin whose invitation you somehow forgot was coming. Everyone treats these as random bolts from the sky. Track them for a few months though, and something strange happens. You start to notice that the unexpected is surprisingly predictable. Something always comes up. There is always a something. Once you can see that pattern written in your own hand, you stop being ambushed and start building a small buffer for it, which turns the most stressful category of spending into the most boring one. Boring in personal finance is almost always a good sign. There is a reason this four-bucket structure has quietly outlived every trendy system, and it is worth understanding before you start. You have probably heard of the 50/30/20 rule, where half your money goes to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings. You may also know the cash envelope method, where you physically divide money into labeled envelopes and spend only what is inside each one. Kakeibo plays beautifully with both. Think of the four categories as your envelopes and the savings first step as your 20%, except Kakeibo adds the one ingredient those systems leave out, which is the nightly reflection. A rule tells you where money should go. An envelope limits where it can go. Only Kakeibo forces you to sit with where it actually went and ask why. That is why people who have bounced off every other budget tend to find this one finally sticks. It does not compete with what you already know. It quietly completes it. Now pay attention to this next part, because it is the piece that separates the people who read about Kakeibo from the people who actually get rich slowly with it. You have the four questions in the four categories. Let me show you exactly how to run this starting this week, step by step, because the title promised you something you could try right away and I am not going to hand you a history lesson and walk off. Step 1 happens on a single quiet evening, ideally a Sunday before the week begins. Grab any notebook you already own. It does not need to be a special imported Kakeibo journal. A spare spiral notebook works perfectly. At the top of the first page, write the money you expect to take home this month. Then list your fixed costs underneath it and subtract them. The number left at the bottom is your real spending money for the month, and you will likely stare at it for a second longer than feels comfortable. Good. That discomfort is the system already working. Step 2 is the move almost nobody makes, and it is the difference between a diary and a wealth tool. Before you assign a single dollar to any spending category, decide your savings number and write it down as money that no longer exists for spending. Then, if you can, move it the same day into a separate account where it is harder to reach. Pay your future self first, while the money is still fresh and your willpower is still full, rather than last, when both are gone. We will come back in a moment to where that savings money should actually sit, because the account you pick quietly multiplies the result. Step 3 is where you split whatever remains across the four categories. You are not chasing perfection on the first attempt. You are making an honest guess. A large share goes to needs, a smaller slice to wants, a modest amount to culture, and a buffer set aside for the unexpected. Write a rough target next to each one in pen. Those targets are not a cage and they are not a promise. They are a hypothesis you are about to test against the truth of your own life over the next 30 days. Step 4 is the daily habit, and it is the entire engine of the method. Every single evening, you write down what you spent that day and drop each purchase into one of the 4 categories. The morning coffee lands under wants, the groceries under needs, the paperback under culture, the surprise parking ticket under unexpected. This whole ritual takes a minute, maybe 90 seconds, and you do it with the television off and your phone face down. The slowness is not a bug to be optimized away. That slowness is the moment your brain finally feels the money move, and that feeling is the thing no app has ever managed to give you. Step 5 arrives at the end of each week, a short check-in where you total each category and ask yourself the honest version of question 3. Where did the real numbers drift away from the targets you set on Sunday? You are not grading yourself, and you are not allowed to call yourself names. You are a detective gathering evidence, nothing more. Then once a month, you sit with all 4 weeks in front of you and answer the full set of 4 questions, especially the last one, and you adjust the targets for the month ahead. That monthly reflection is the loop that compounds. Each month you see a little more clearly than the last. Let me make all of that concrete with real numbers, because steps can feel abstract until you watch them run. Take a delivery driver named Dominic who brings home about $3,000 a month. On Sunday he writes that $3,000 at the top, then subtracts his fixed costs, $1,100 for rent, $200 for his car, $300 for utilities and his phone. That leaves him $1,400 of real spending money. Before touching it, he decides to save $200 and moves it out that same evening, which leaves $1,200. He splits the $1,200 into rough targets, $700 for needs like groceries and gas, $300 for wants, $100 for culture, and $100 parked for the unexpected. Then he simply logs every night. 3 weeks in, his wants column has already blown past $300 and is closing in on $500, almost entirely takeout and convenience store runs he never would have guessed added up to that. He did not need an app to catch it. He needed to see it in his own handwriting. Next month his wants target holds and that extra $200 quietly joins his savings instead. If this is already making your own spending feel a bit more visible, do me one quiet favor and subscribe, because I break down one of these calm, no hype money systems every single week, and the ones coming next build directly on this foundation. Now let me get into the part that turns this humble notebook into actual dollars in your account. You have been logging for a few weeks. The notebook is full of small, honest entries, and now comes the payoff that makes every minute of writing worth it. This is the moment the method stops being a diary and starts being a wealth tool. And it happens through 2 discoveries that hit almost everyone who sticks with it long enough. The first discovery is the leak you could not see before. Let me use a number that feels completely harmless. A single specialty coffee runs about $6 now. Buy one on each workday, and that comes to roughly $126 a month, which works out to about $1,500 a year flowing out of a category you probably labeled as a harmless one without a second thought. That is one habit. The notebook tends to surface 3 or 4 of them at once. The forgotten streaming services you stopped watching months ago, the food delivered to your door while groceries quietly rotted in the fridge, the gym membership, the subscriptions billing in the background like a slow leak under the sink. People who commit to tracking by hand tend to trim something like 15 to 20% off their discretionary spending within the first couple of months, and not because anyone forced them to. Awareness alone changes behavior. On a household spending $4,000 a month, 15 to 20% is $600 to $800 surfacing out of what felt like thin air. The second discovery is what you do with that freed up money, and this is where being awake to your finances starts to compound in your favor. Say the method helps you redirect $300 a month that used to vanish without a trace. Where that money lands next decides almost everything. If you let it sit in a checking account or in a savings account at one of the big traditional banks, you are likely earning around 0.01% on it, which on $10,000 is about $1 of interest a year, $1. The national average savings rate right now is only about 0.38%, so the typical account is barely better than that. But a competitive high-yield savings account in 2026 is paying somewhere in the neighborhood of 4%. On that same $10,000, 4% earns you $400 a year instead of $1. Same money, same effort, 400 times the result, purely for parking it in the right place. That is the kind of gap that makes accountants do a quiet double take, and almost half the country is leaving it on the table without realizing it. It is worth pausing on why that 4% even exists right now, because it will not last forever. The Federal Reserve has been holding its benchmark rate steady through the first half of 2026, which keeps savings yields unusually high by the standards of the last 15 years. For most of the 2010s, a high-yield account paid almost nothing because there was nothing to pay. Today, the same account pays real money for the simple act of moving your savings to the right place. That window will eventually close when rates come down, which is exactly why the dollars your notebook freed up this year are worth more parked correctly now than they will be later. Awareness without action is just a tidier kind of standing still. Now stretch the timeline out, because this is where the quiet part of the title earns its keep. Take the $300 the notebook freed up, and once your safety cushion is built, send it into a low-cost index fund earning something like the long-run market average of 7% a year. Leave it completely alone for 30 years. You will have contributed about $108,000 of your own money, and that account would grow to roughly $366,000. Even half that, $150 a month, becomes a small fortune over the same stretch. None of that came from a raise, a side hustle, or a windfall. It came from a notebook, a pen, and the willingness to look. That is the entire trick, and it has been hiding in plain sight for over a century. This is also where the method quietly defends you against the single most expensive trap in American life, which is high-interest debt. Total household debt in the country just hit a record $18.8 trillion, and credit card balances alone now sit at about $1.25 trillion. The average interest rate on a balance carried month to month is north of 21%. Carry $5,000 on a card at that rate for a year, and you hand the bank roughly $1,100 in interest for nothing in return. The reason Kakeibo matters here is brutal in its simplicity. People reach for a credit card when an unexpected cost lands and there is no cushion to absorb it. Remember that 59% who cannot cover a $1,000 emergency from savings. The unexpected category, the one that looked like the least important of the four, is the exact thing standing between you and that statistic. Fund it, and a surprise bill is an annoyance. Ignore it, and the same bill becomes a balance you pay 21% on for years. Let me come back to the promise and the title, because the words on any income are not a marketing trick. They are the whole point. The personal saving rate is a behavior, not a salary. A household earning $3,100 a month that tracks every dollar and pays itself first will outsave a household earning $10,000 a month that never once looks. That is precisely why Lorena is ahead of her brother. He has far more income flowing through his hands, but it flows straight through and out the other side. She has less, yet nothing moves without her seeing it first. The notebook does not know or care how big your paycheck is. It only cares whether you are awake while the money is moving. And here is the part that should change how you think about your own situation. Awareness scales down beautifully. If you earn very little, every leak you plug is a larger share of your total, which means the method works harder for you, not less. The person with the tightest budget has the most to gain from finally seeing clearly, because they have the least room left to waste. That is the quiet inversion at the center of all this. The tool the financial industry would never bother trying to sell you. A notebook that costs a couple of dollars at a drugstore delivers the most value to exactly the people the industry tends to ignore. Wesley, who drives for a delivery service and never cracked four figures in savings in his life, found $300 of monthly leaks in his first month of logging and built his first real emergency cushion by the end of the year. His income barely moved. His awareness did all the work. This is the same lesson that has kept the method alive in Japan for over a century. It was never designed for the wealthy. It was designed for households where every coin counted, where there was no margin for a mystery leak, and where seeing clearly was the only edge available. That origin is precisely why it travels so well to anyone feeling squeezed today, with prices up roughly a quarter since before the pandemic and wages that never quite caught up. The method does not require a good economy or a fat paycheck to work. It only requires that you stop letting money move in the dark, and that is something you can do tonight, no matter what your account balance reads right now. I do want to be honest with you, because hype is the last thing this channel is about. Kakeibo is simple, though it does ask something real of you. Logging every purchase, sorting it, and reflecting each week adds up to something like 15 to 20 minutes a week. An app takes 2. If you have a chaotic schedule, young kids, or a brain that fights routine, that time cost is genuine, and pretending otherwise would be doing you a disservice. The notebook also cannot do your math for you. It will not calculate your debt-free date or flash a warning the instant you are about to overspend. You are the engine. Skip a week, and the backlog can feel heavy enough that quitting starts to look tempting. So let me tell you how people actually make it stick, because the difference between the ones who quit and the ones who build wealth comes down to a few small adjustments. First, lower the bar on day 1. Do not try to track perfectly. Just track at all. A messy notebook you actually keep beats a flawless spreadsheet you abandon by March. Second, if pure pen and paper feels like too much friction for your life, run a hybrid. Keep the 4 categories and the weekly questions, which are the parts that create awareness, and let an app handle the raw arithmetic if that is what keeps you in the game. The handwriting matters, but the mindfulness matters more, and the mindfulness is the part you must protect. Third, do not let a single bad month convince you that you have failed. The 4th question, how can you improve, exists for exactly that reason, so that a slip becomes a piece of information instead of a verdict. Rosa quit twice in her first year before it finally stuck on the 3rd try, and the only thing that changed was that she stopped expecting herself to be perfect at it. One more trick separates the people who keep going from the people who drift away, and it costs nothing. Attach the nightly log to a habit you already have. Do it right after you brush your teeth, or while the kettle boils, or the second you sit down on the couch at night. A brand new habit floating on its own tends to evaporate within a week, but a habit bolted onto an existing routine borrows that routine strength and survives. Keep the notebook in the same spot every night, pen resting on top, so there is zero friction between deciding to log and actually logging. The goal of the first month is not insight or savings. The goal is simply to not miss a night, because consistency is the soil everything else grows out of. You should also hold realistic expectations about the results, because the internet will lie to you about almost everything. You may have seen the method's loudest champions claim it can cut your spending by 35%. On a $4,000 monthly budget, 35% would be $1,400 a month, an enormous swing. For a few highly motivated people in their first intense months, something close to that is genuinely possible. For the rest of us, the honest and durable win is smaller and steadier, that 15% trim on the spending you were never really enjoying in the first place. The real prize was never one dramatic headline number anyway. It is the slow rewiring of your entire relationship with money, from something that happens to you in the dark into something you direct in the light. That rewiring does not show up on a single statement. It shows up across years in the quiet fact that you always seem to have a cushion when everyone around you is scrambling. Which brings us full circle back to Lorena and her brother, on the same street, shopping at the same stores, paying the same prices. The thing that separated them was never luck, and it was never the size of a paycheck. It was a $2 notebook and the willingness to look at the truth every single night. You now have the 4 questions, the 4 categories, and the 5 steps to begin this week. A pen and any blank notebook you can find around the house are genuinely all you need to start tonight. But I would be doing you a disservice if I let you walk away believing the notebook is the finish line, because it is only the doorway. Tracking your money teaches you what is happening. It does not on its own teach you how the whole machine works underneath the surface. How interest is actually calculated and why it can either build you a fortune or bury you alive depending on which side of it you sit. How a credit score is really scored and what quietly moves it up or down. Why a high-yield account pays 400 times what a big bank pays on the very same dollars. How retirement accounts hand you tax advantages that go unclaimed by millions of people every single year. Kakeibo makes you aware of the gap in your finances. Understanding the system underneath is what finally lets you close it for good. That is why, before you ever pick up the pen, the smartest first move is making sure the foundation under it is solid. I I put together a full breakdown of financial literacy that covers everything the school system somehow never taught any of us, the real mechanics behind debt, credit, saving, and investing, laid out in plain language with no jargon and no selling. If anything in this video made you realize how much had been moving through your life without your permission, that breakdown is the natural next place to go, because a notebook will faithfully record a system you do not understand, and understanding it first is what turns simple awareness into actual freedom. Learn the foundation, then start your Kakeibo. Understand the house before you start keeping the books on it.